Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and it's time for part 12 of the Vinyl Record Collection Tour. Whatever you want to call it. We're here, part 12. Let's get right on into it. Today we are starting with the letter J, and we are only going to get partially through the letter J, because there's going to be a whole section, as we will find out, dedicated to one artist. All part 13 is going to be one artist. I can't wait for it. But until then, let's crack through the remainder of the J's, at least for the most part. Starting with Jackson. Not Michael Jackson, not yet. Well, kind of, sort of. I had this Jackson 5 Greatest Hits record. I actually don't remember where I got this. If I bought it myself or if it was as part of another collection. I want to say the latter. Contains a lot of the Jackson 5 hits that are relevant today. I Want You Back, ABC, I'll Be There. As far as like groups that are fronted by kids go, it could get a lot worse. It could get a lot worse than the Jackson 5. And it actually probably can't really get a whole lot better because Michael Jackson, even at that age, was a phenomenal frontman and a phenomenal entertainer. It is a bit saccharine, as a lot of Motown was in those days, and just in general. But again, that comes with the territory a bit. So I don't hold it against the Jackson 5. I don't hold it against Michael Jackson as a kid. And we will come back to Michael Jackson as a kid, teenager, I guess, pretty soon. But there's one record to get to before that. A record that has been on my to-listen list for a while, but I have not actually heard it. This one I definitely got as part of another collection. This is Joe Jackson's Body and Soul. I've heard a lot of things about Joe Jackson. I've heard a lot of people say that like Joe Jackson is going to be my shit whenever I listen to him, and I have zero doubt in my mind that he will be. However, I would be lying to you if I said I knew this album at all. I've never heard it, so I am going to withhold any comments until I do. However, I am happy to own it, especially because I'm pretty sure this is his most well-regarded, most famous album. So happy to have it in the collection, and once I do explore it, I'm sure I will be adding more Joe Jackson records to my collection. But back to Michael Jackson. This I found at a used store. It's in bad shape. The record's in bad shape. But I can't really be asked to spend more money on this. This is $5. This is Ben. Michael's second album. And I don't know. I struggle as far as how to rate the pre-Quincy Jones Michael Jackson albums. Off the top of my head, I could not tell you which one I thought was the best and which one I thought was the weakest. I suppose the song Ben on here is one of his better solo songs as a kid. But I think there's more historical value to this record than there is value in the actual music, because again, it's all pretty saccharine. I suppose I'll take that back. I think whatever, is it Forever Michael, I think is the fourth one, the one that was done when he was like 17 or something like that. That I think by definition is the best because he's aged into his voice then, at least, even if the material is not what it would be on the future records. At least he sounds mature. He sounds like the Michael Jackson we're going to know and love very soon here. So that would be my pick from the early MJ records. But anyways, we have Off the Wall. I think this is a terrific record. This is a terrific album. For as much love as the 80s records get, very deservedly so. This is a straight fire. This is about as good as a disco album can get. Every single song, I just think we'll talk about MJ as a performer, because Michael Jackson as a singer and as a performer is absolutely phenomenal. Almost almost untouched, I think. I think there's very few who can captivate an audience in the way that he can just naturally, or could. But the songs on here, the instrumentalists, the playing is so sharp, and that's only going to get magnified on what is to come. So, you know, I'm very partial to like the first two Michael records. I think more so than anything else he did. Even with Bad, once you get to that era, I think there's something about it that turns me off a tiny bit. As much as I know that Bad is a great album front to back without really a skip on it, I just think there's like a very natural enthusiasm that he has on these albums that he's just never really able to capture again. It always seems a little bit more forced, a little bit more cynical, because he is MJ the megastar at that point. Off the Wall, I think the best track without a doubt is, well, I can't say that actually. Rock With You is fantastic, and Burn This Disco Out is fantastic. I would say those might be my two favorites. And then we get to Thriller. You know, one of the essentials in any music fan's collection, really. You know, I can understand why people's opinions have changed as far as Michael Jackson goes. He's no longer the quite the revered figure that he once was, and I understand why. Totally understand it, totally agree. But the strength of Thriller, I think, is there's so much that is strong about it. It's just well executed across the board. It sounds phenomenal. You're not going to get very many pop albums that sound better than Thriller or as good as Thriller even. The actual songs on it are pretty much incredible across the board. I guess you could argue that it closes rather weakly. And I know people don't like The Girl Is Mine. I understand. I am biased because of Paul McCartney, so I will not comment on that. But I understand why people don't like it. But Jesus Christ, there's so much else on here. There's so much else as far as quality material. He was riding a high. He was riding a creative and performative high that you don't see all that much. You don't see all that much. And very few other albums have created the amount of hype, the amount of single success and things like that as Thriller did. And so for that reason, like, I think it still deserves a proper place in the canon. I think the music on some level, in my view, can stand apart from what the creator did. That's, you know, that's a personal choice for everybody. I would never say that you absolutely need to like Thriller by any means. But to me, I think I can't separate the music enough to still see the incredible value that it has had, and I think will continue to have. Random jazz record that I own. This one's really good though, actually. Ahmad Jamal, Volume 4. Great piano jazz record from the late 50s. Live jazz record too. It was recorded in 58. Released in 59, I want to say. Ahmad Jamal, absolutely fantastic piano player. I don't know where I'd put him in a ranking of my favorite jazz pianists. I don't think I could even do that if I tried off the top of my head, although certainly like Oscar Peterson would be near the very top, if not at the top. But Jamal was an excellent player. I remember enjoying this album a lot when I heard it a couple of years ago. So we're going to give it its due. I think I kind of stumbled across it. One thing I've noticed is buying used jazz albums for like reasonable prices. I have tended to struggle with that. And as far as like 50s and early to mid 60s era jazz anyways, the period that I'm probably the most familiar with, kind of hard to find those records used. You have, of course, the reissues, which is where like my Miles Davis collection comes from, is entirely reissues, I think. But finding like just genuine like used copies of those records for, again, reasonable prices, very hard, because of, I think, how revered they are as far as the quality of the original pressings, that sort of thing. Jazz attracts audiophiles. That's the problem. That is the problem. And that's why I have so much difficulty building up a truly good jazz collection, I think, because it's hard to do that while on a budget. I was going to say a shoestring budget, but like, let's be honest here. Like, with the amount of records that I've been talking about, you know, I'm not affording just a shoestring budget to buying vinyl records. Let's be transparent. Jan and Dean time. Possibly their best album. I have not really explored all of their stuff, but very enjoyable album. The Little Old Lady from Pasadena from '63, I think. The title track was the first Jan and Dean song I ever heard, so I've always had a nostalgia for it. And, you know, it's one of those things. There are some amazing song titles on here. My second favorite is probably Horace the Swingin' School Bus Driver, but absolutely the number one, that one I think is a cover, but absolutely the best song title on here is the incredibly lengthy, like, I want to say this held a record or still holds a record for the longest song title in the Billboard Hot 100. The Anaheim Azusa and Cucamonga Sewing Circle Book Review and Timing Association, the opener of side 2, which is actually not a bad little song. Very much like the verses are in kind of the same idea, something like The Little Old Lady from Pasadena, because of course they are. But it's actually not a bad little track. So, Jan and Dean, I struggle to call them underrated. I think there is this idea, this kind of mythologized idea from some people that Jan Berry was like on par with Brian Wilson, or could have been on par with Brian Wilson. And I don't think the music that I've heard suggests that really at all. I think if anything, it seems obvious that Jan was imitating Brian Wilson a lot and drawing from a lot of the same influences. But who knows? I mean, we won't really know because Jan was kind of cut down in his prime. So we'll never know what he was truly capable of, but I do not think he could have ever made something close to a Pet Sounds or even a Today, if I'm being perfectly honest. But let's stop talking about Jan and Dean and Beach Boys, and we'll talk about Japanese Breakfast Jubilee. Good God. This is one of my favorite albums of the last 10 years. And possibly my favorite album of the 2020s so far. That's really hard to say. Actually, I take it back, because probably something like Taylor Swift's Evermore, if I had to be technical about it, is probably number one. But good God, this is a fantastic album. And I have not even read Michelle's book, Crying in H Mart. I actually have it on the shelf behind me. It's on like the bottom shelf, so you won't be able to see it. But I do have Crying in H Mart, and it's been on my to-read list for a while, but my to-read list is also insanely long, so I haven't gotten around to it. But I will one day. I'm very excited to. And yeah, I mean, this record, it sounds so good. Like, it's such a crisp production and a crisp approach to writing pop rock tunes, which you see so much of in 2020 in that era. Like, I stand by what I've said before, potentially in this video, or in this series, and if not, then I'll say it first here, that I think 2020, as far as being a year for like female artists specifically, releasing albums, was fantastic. Or I should say 2020 to 2021, because of course I'm remembering that this came out in 2021, so look how good my memory is. Favorite song, cliched, but probably Kokomo, Indiana. I think that's an amazing song, but there's stacks of them on that record. And she's such a captivating singer too. I just love her voice. Okay. Al Jardine, A Postcard from California. This is kind of a funny album to have on vinyl. I have strived to get as much of the solo Beach Boys as I can on vinyl, similar to like solo Beatles and some other artists. And that requires you to go to some strange places and look for some strange things. This one I actually just stumbled upon on like a cheapo records in downtown Minneapolis, I think. Because they just reissued this on vinyl and CD just a couple of years ago. So yeah, I have Al Jardine's only solo album. It exists, certainly. It's pleasant enough. I think Jardine was always a much better ensemble player than anything else, and when he takes a turn at the lead vocals, sometimes it's fantastic. I love his rendition of Cotton Fields, the single version specifically. But like this album, I just, It's kind of a non-entity. Like, it's not bad. It's not annoyingly mediocre, but there's not much there. A very beat-up copy of Jefferson Airplane's Surrealistic Pillow, the only album that I have of theirs. To me, very clearly their best. Very slick, phenomenal vocalist. And I think when you listen to this record in context with everything else that was coming out in like 66, 67, really it is fascinating how much it steps apart from certainly a lot of the popular stuff that was coming out around this time. I mean, this thing really like catches you off guard, especially White Rabbit. I know people have praised that song to hell and back, but it's captivating, absolutely captivating, and Slick's vocal is phenomenal. Another album of recent that I think is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm very, very happy to own this on vinyl. This is Cassandra Jenkins, An Overview on Phenomenal Nature. Cassandra Jenkins is this indie folk artist who, she's released a couple of projects. I think this is the only one I've heard from her so far, although I liked it so much upon first listen. Like, it's been a while since I've enjoyed an album as much on first listen as I did this record, and I don't know what it is. I just think the textures are really fantastic. She creates a great atmosphere. I love Hard Drive. I love Hard Drive. Probably the highlight of the album for me. And that cover too is just peaceful. I mean, that's the type of thing you frame on your wall for sure. So yeah, Cassandra Jenkins, also one of the best things, maker of one of the best records that I've heard out in quite a while, without a doubt. Okay, I got this for $1. It is in horrible condition, but I did kind of want to get it just to say that I own a copy of it. I don't even know. I don't even know if I want to know what condition the record is in with a look like that. Yeah, it looks marked to hell and back. But at least I have a copy of Aqualung. Probably the best Jethro Tull album. It's the obvious pick from most people. I mean, look at that back cover and just shred it. Probably their best album, if I'm being honest. And so, obviously, one of these days I will upgrade on this pressing. It will happen. But, you know, for $1 in like a bargain bin, I couldn't say no. Because, again, as I've said before, there is that part of me that kind of pities these like really sad looking records that are just going to be kind of faded to the junk bin. Again, I don't play vinyl records enough to really care all that much about the condition of them. So something like that's in that awful condition, but that's only $1. Sure, I'll buy it. Why not? It looks good on the shelf. Okay. And now we're actually going to close this video off with a series of albums from an artist that I think used to be one of my absolute favorites. I don't think he is anymore. I think I've cooled on him a bit, but I can't deny the talent, and I can't deny, well, there are a lot of things I can't deny, like the songwriting in a lot of ways. That is Mr. Billy Joel. We start with his debut, Cold Spring Harbor, which I think is fantastic. This is actually a promotional copy too, which is really interesting. I don't know, to answer your question, I don't believe this is one of the ones that has the fast tape speed. If that even technically got out, I can't even remember the logistics of the story anymore. But Cold Spring Harbor is one that is very underrated in the Billy Joel canon, without a shadow of a doubt. I think the vocals on here are phenomenal, really youthful. People say, you hear people say, well, yeah, the tape speed's sped up on the version that we all know. And it's like, no, it's not. Billy Joel's just very young here. That's just youth. Because the guy's like 20. She's Got Away is phenomenal. I mean, it's very hard to open up a debut album any better than that. And the piano playing, like Falling of the Rain, like this guy, spoiler alert, the artist we're going to be talking about in part 13 is Elton John. And if we're going to compare the two as pianists, I think Billy Joel wins from a technical level. He's certainly more flashy than Elton is. Like, Elton can spit out some riffs when you're not expecting it, but Billy Joel, I think, is truly a remarkable piano player. Absolutely fantastic. And Cold Spring Harbor is one of his best showcases of it, without a doubt. We skipped the second record, Piano Man, although I do plan on getting it. My roommate actually had it at one point, so we would put it on the turntable back in the dorm. But Street Life Serenade, his third record, it's not one of my favorites of his. In fact, I think if I'm doing the math on it, it's my least favorite 70s album of his. But there's still highlights like Los Angelinos, The Entertainer, stuff like that. Root Beer Rag, again, the piano playing really coming to the forefront here, which is really cool. I just think this one sort of sits snugly amongst the other Billy Joel records from this time period. I don't think it necessarily stands out, especially when you compare it to what came afterwards. So Turnstiles. Turnstiles is his first truly great album all the way through. Cold Spring Harbor, you could argue, is a bit patchy still, but Turnstiles is great. So many fantastic songs. Say Goodbye to Hollywood and Summer Highland Falls, New York State of Mind. I really like James. Prelude and Angry Young Man, Miami 2017. I mean, he's really, I think, pulled together his songwriting here for the first time, and that really comes through. Like, I think the first three records show potential with glimmers of excellence, such as the title track for Piano Man, as overplayed as that is. But Turnstiles is where he really puts it all together. And in some ways, I still would argue it's maybe his most consistent album. And the reason for that is while I think that this, The Stranger, is Billy Joel's best album, as I think a lot of people would tell you, it is a bit inconsistent. And it ends on the weakest song, which is just, it's a pet peeve of mine. Like, please don't do that. If you're sequencing a record, please don't end on the worst song. That's my plea to everybody. Side one is very just kind of overpowered, the best single side of music that he ever released. And side two opens incredibly strongly. I mean, 3 back-to-back amazing songs. And then Get It Right the First Time is a solid rocker that wouldn't feel out of place on something like Street Life Serenader. And Everybody Has a Dream just kind of drags. So I don't think Billy Joel has a truly, like, ahead of the curve, above all the rest, fantastic album. I mean, I would be lying if I said that he didn't have a classic, because everybody has heard of this album. Everybody knows the album cover I just saw. Who was it? Victoria Justice just is parodying this album cover now. I mean, everybody knows it. It's obviously a classic. I just don't think it's a 10 out of 10, if you will. It is a bit inconsistent, and I do think that is where Billy Joel peaks. He doesn't fall very fast, though, and he doesn't fall very hard. 52nd Street is very strong. There are more weak songs on here than there are in The Stranger, but the opening 3 songs, okay, I'm going to be honest, Big Shot and My Life are 2 songs that have been really hurt by radio overplay for me. Honesty, I adore. I really love the groove of Zanzibar. Rosalinda's Eyes on side 2 is very pleasant. 52nd Street, there's a bit more kind of griminess, a little bit of more jazziness to it, which I think is really cool. So it's not The Stranger Part 2, like some people maybe try to claim that it is. But it is not quite as strong. The record afterwards, Glass Houses. I have never really loved this album. There are some good songs. Again, the 2 most famous songs on here are 2 songs like You May Be Right, It's Still Rock and Roll to Me. I mean, they are ingrained in my head from years of listening to classic rock radio. I'm not really going to be able to undo that, I don't think. So, but it's quite good. There are still some moments that I think are underrated. Sometimes a Fantasy. Don't ask me why. I love that one. All for Lena has a great chorus melody to it. There's moments on Glass Houses that I think are absolutely fantastic. And it's a strong record overall. But I don't know. I feel like I'm coming across more negative than I really want to here. I'm not trying to shit on Billy Joel by any means, because I still like and have nostalgia for a lot of these albums. It's just kind of is what it is, He has grown off me a bit more in recent years. The Nylon Curtain. This is perhaps the enlightened fans' favorite Billy Joel album. In that case, I suppose I'm not enlightened. People compare it to his closest thing to a Beatles or a John Lennon album. Also another promotional copy, which is fun. Allentown, Laura, Pressure. I really like side 1. I think side 2 I'm not quite as keen on with this album for whatever reason. I know what he's trying to go for. I hear the Beatles influence, the John Lennon influence. I really do. But I've never been captivated by these songs here. I don't know what it is. Hard to say. I think I do tend to like Billy Joel when he is being a little bit more exuberant, and he's not trying to play into the Springsteen side of his writing quite as much. But I don't know. Case in point, though, of when I like Billy Joel exuberant, An Innocent Man. Yeah, it is a throwback album in the best way. I think this is so much fun, so enjoyable front to back. And the vocals on here in particular, I haven't talked much about Billy Joel as a vocalist. That guy can sing his ass off when he wants to. And Innocent Man, he really starts to let his voice, his vocals fly. He also does that on River of Dreams to an extent. He has several songs on River of Dreams where he's singing his butt off. But Innocent Man, I think he allows himself to really lean into the cheese and really just have fun with it. And the results are the title track, The Longest Time, which is really cool. Uptown Girl, what a phenomenal pop song Uptown Girl is. That one has not been ruined by any means. I still am not sick of it. And Leave a Tender Moment Alone, if you want to plug for his most underrated vocal. Also, I have 2 copies of this for whatever reason. I think this one was also inherited as part of another collection. And then the last record I have to show for today is his worst, The Bridge. This is, I hesitate to say it's bad. I don't really think it's bad. I do, however, think that it is misguided sometimes in some of the creative decisions that it tries. And if misguided isn't the right word, then at the very least, it doesn't quite stick the landing. I really like certain songs, A Matter of Trust. Baby Grand is a cool idea. I don't know if he and Ray Charles stick the landing as well as they could, but I think that works. And Big Man on Mulberry Street, again, kind of sort of works as a jazz tune. But there's enough like moments on here that I'm just not a fan of to where I cannot recommend this. Again, it doesn't get worse. I do prefer Stormfront to this, and I prefer River of Dreams quite a bit to this. But the bridge is it's a sharp step down from everything he'd been doing before. Which is kind of a negative way to end this video. But I do not own Stormfront or River of Dreams on vinyl at this point, so save that for another day. But until then, I appreciate that you all watched this. Thank you so much for doing that. Stick tuned for part 13, which is going to be our Elton John special. I'm sure you can't wait for that. Until then, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. More videos to come. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. You've been watching Music Deep Dive.